Joining me today, we have Alba Mineral Resources. We have George Frangiskidis, Executive Chairman, as well as Mark Austin, Chief Operating Officer and Senior Geologist. Thanks for joining me today, guys.
Thanks, Fran. Nice to speak to you.
You too. So let's start with Greenwalk Mining. At the end of September, Alba told investors that the spin-off, which is based on its Greenland mining assets, had begun trading on AIM. So can we talk a little bit about this and what percentage of each of the IPO costs will be reimbursed to the company?
So all IPO costs incurred by Alba, which was approximately £350,000, will be reimbursed by Greenroc, plus about £500,000 of the drilling costs that were incurred by Alba before Greenroc took over, so the drilling costs from this summer program. So I think that is, a pretty good result for Alba. So much covered most of our costs on the drilling, all of our costs on the IPO. So essentially, we financed the IPO, but the money has been reimbursed to us post out of the raising that Greenroc did. The payments are in cash, and we've either had the repayments to us already or they're going to be paid imminently. So that's really the position on costs.
Amazing. And last month, UK Oil and Gas, which operates the Horse Hill project, announced that it had completed a planned 2-week production facility upgrade at the oil field. So can we talk about this? Can you give us a sort of general update at the field?
Yeah, sure. As you said, in September, they said that they'd what they actually said in September was that they're preparing essentially the site, or they have prepared the site for automated 24-hour production, continuous production. So that's a good thing, obviously. They're trying to cut costs, the operator, to make it more of a profitable oil field moving forward. The more you can automate that, obviously, if you can go to 24-hour production, then both of those things are very beneficial and very positive in terms of net revenues. So that's a positive. Obviously, before that, I think it was about January of this year, UCOG said that they'd done some more work and they've identified some significant infill drilling opportunities at Horse Hill. They were planning to drill another vertical well into the Portland oil pool, as well as an inclined well into the Kimmeridge. I mean, the thing about Horse Hill that we need to remember is that the oil is still there, and it is still a significant oil play. The Portland is significant. Obviously, the Kimmeridge has flowed significantly as well over time. Both have contributed to the production at the oil field. The reverse that UCOG had was the drilling of the horizontal well. I think that's well documented, and it obviously didn't go to plan. So I think that's the technical reverse that's been had, but the project and its fundamentals are still the same. So we would certainly be supportive of further vertical wells being drilled because they are far less risky technically, and we'll tap into that oil pool, in a way that will bring decent flow and at decent recoveries. So we certainly think it's still a very positive story. Obviously, it's dependent on UCOG spending the money now to drill those additional holes, and that's, I think, where they've been focused on another project, and I hope they'll come back to this one after that.
And do you have any credible reason to believe that the situation will improve over the next 6 months, say?
For Horse Hill?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess we can't sort of look into the crystal ball in the sense of looking at what UCOG's plans are in terms of timing. A lot of that depends, I think, on when they finish up with their other operations and can swing back into looking at new wells at Horse Hill. But as I said, the potential is all still there. It certainly makes sense in our view to drill 1 or 2 further verticals to tap into the reservoir in different places. So I think that definitely makes sense. So the positives are there. The fundamentals haven't changed of the project, and the oil price is riding particularly high, as we know. So yes, I think there's reason to believe that things will improve.
So Alba recently completed a structural review at its Limerick base metals project. Can you talk about what this showed exactly?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
we
Mark.
basically looked at all the available data, our own data, all the regional data. We did some reinterpretation of the geophysical data as well. And out of that came a very clear target for us, which we believe we'll later on next year, we will start drilling probably 3 holes down to 200 meters each. And that will target then the intersection of structure and stratigraphy, which is well known in the island to be the main target area for zinc lead deposits.
Great. And could you both touch on Gwen Finnish? I know in recent months the company has identified a new high-grade regional gold target within the license area close to this. Could you give us a sort of update on this?
Sure. Well, I mean, Mark, you can chip in as well. I was just going to say on that yes, we've done quite a lot of work on the license since we've had it, which hasn't been that long, digitizing the mine plan, doing some 3D modeling, all very much similar to what we did when we started with Clogau and our work there. Stream sediment sampling over some of the license area targets, massive data compilation, collecting all the data from Gwen Finnish goes back to the 1970s with the regional geophysics that the Mineral Reconnaissance Programme did. That's the precursor to the British Geological Survey. As you say, we identified a new gold target very close to Gwen Finnish with some really good grades. So quite a lot of work's been done. I mean, obviously our focus has been on Clogau for obvious reasons. We continue to be focused on Clogau, but at some point we will clearly want to move back into Gwen Finnish in a more concerted way. And all of this work that we've done in the background, if you like, is laying the foundation. We go back into Gwen Finnish and do exactly the same work that we've been doing at Clogau. Mark, do you want us to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think basically the fundamentals of the area, the region, where the intersection of quartz-filled shear zones, the greenstone rocks, and the Clogau shale have not changed for Gwen Finnish. So we're maintaining that as our exploration guidelines, as it were. We are putting together some exploration plans there, which include drilling, soil sampling, some geophysics, some nice aerial geophysics, by the way, using a UAV, a drone. So we're not sitting on our hands. We're doing something at Gwen Finnish, and we believe that it's a good target for us in the future. We're also looking a little bit more regionally outside of Gwen Finnish, as George said. Our geologists have been out in the field. They've identified some really interesting stuff, quartz veins and things associated with known structural surface features, and we'll start doing some fundamental work on there. In fact, we've already started some stream sediment sampling in the streams and getting some positive results. So all, I think, looking very positive for the future.
I've got a question here from a shareholder which says, since Alba has been sitting on Clogau for nearly a decade, why not form a joint venture to get the mine moving if the company doesn't have sufficient resources? What would you say to that exactly?
Yes, well, it would be nice if we had been sitting on it for a decade, but I know that came from one of the questions that was submitted to you, but we've actually only had majority ownership of the mine for 3 years, and since August of 2018, so just over 3 years. And we've done a phenomenal amount of work there in that 3-year period, which we can touch on, I'm sure, with some of the other questions that have been asked. But we don't need a joint venture. I'm not saying we wouldn't look at a joint venture, because if it was the right partner with the right credentials and had some other strings to its bow that would add to the piece, but not technical strings and not necessarily financial strings either, because we've had no problem doing the work at Clogau that we've done. We've done extensive work there, and so I don't agree with the premise of the question to be to be honest. We have the resources to make things happen, and we've been making a lot happen, done a heck of a lot more than anyone else has done on this project. Previous operators in the last 10, 20 years have done practically nothing. We've done a huge amount of work to move the project forward.
And would you say there is extractable gold there that is economically viable?
Well, that's the $64 million question, Fran. It's exactly what we're doing. The drilling was for structure. We've identified targets. You mentioned the RNS that came out yesterday, and that is exactly what we've been working towards, which is to hone in, refine on some high priority targets that we get into. That's why we're talking about accessing those zones with new development. And once we're into those zones, extracting significant tonnage from them to get a representative idea of gold content. From there, Mark and his team will be able to determine, how many of those zones are economical for commercial mining. That's the name of the game. That's what we've been building towards. So we will know that, as I say, once we put that development in, whether it's in the Leckfraith shaft and getting into there, whether it's this 48-meter crosscut that we're talking about in order to access a new branch lode that we identified through our drilling that hasn't been known about before, accessing the Jack Williams lode, all of those targets, from that work, we will know how many of those zones are economically extractable. Mark, is that fair comment?
Yeah, that's exactly right, George. Just going back a little bit, we couldn't have done any more work than we already have done. I think we've maximized our resources. The drilling, as we've constantly said in the RNSs, is for structure, because we understand the gold mineralization in relation to the structure. I know we have defined enough structure now to have a really good 3D model, and we're now about to embark on the next phase, which is going into development and to expose the veins, and that will then determine what the amount of mineralization is going to be, and what we expect to find. So yeah, we've done the structural work, we've done the good base work on the ground with the boreholes and everything like that, and the interpretation. The next phase is now to determine what gold is available down there, and then that feeds into hopefully a feasibility study and then mine production.
And based on the current grades that you've identified through the phase 1 and 2 drilling program, do you then plan to take the mine into commercial production in the areas that are naturally draining in the event that a dewatering permit isn't obtained by the group?
Well, I think we kind of touched on that to an extent. I mean, commercial production, obviously, that's the end goal here for Clogau, and that's why we picked up a majority interest in the project, and that's why we've been working it so diligently ever since. I mean, that's the end goal here. But you're right to suggest that the dewatering of the Leckfraith shaft, which I know people are very keen on, and we are also, is just one of a number of high priority development targets at Clogau, as we announced yesterday. So as I said, there's also this crosscut that we want to put in to access a new branch lode, Jack Williams, and it's only a 48-meter cut that we're talking about. That might sound like a big endeavor, but as we'll come to, it's really not in mining terms. I mean, the beauty of this project and this mine is that it's there, and we're adding to it. We're not starting from scratch, which would be incredibly expensive. We are just adding some areas of development to access new zones. It was always going to be the requirement to do that at Clogau. But even the Leckfraith shaft, I mean, Mark, tell me if I'm talking out of school here, but I don't think it's inconceivable that even if the dewatering permit were not approved, and we'll come to that in a moment, I'm sure, we could still put in potentially an inclined shaft to access that 120-meter extension that we've identified through our drilling, just without going into isolating essentially the existing development, not going anywhere near the flooded workings. Is that do you agree, Mark?
Yeah, I do. I mean, ideally, we'd like to dewater because that would sort of get us down there quicker. But if that doesn't happen, then we go around behind all the flooded area and we access the area at depth and leave that flooded area behind. So it's easier to do. It's very basic mining principles involved there. So yeah, it's not an issue to us at all. Well, it is an issue in terms of timing, maybe a little bit longer now to do that development to get down there. But I mean, as George was saying as well, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket with Legfraith. We're looking at other target areas at the same time. So I think in terms of developing the mine, we've been pretty responsible in spreading our ability to determine the mineralization that's underground.
Mm. And do you believe that Alba knows enough about the structure at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we can always know more. We can always do more drilling, and we can always uncover further high priority zones. And no doubt we will in future. But we've got enough.
Mm.
We've got enough to be getting on with, and the drilling has been very successful. And I'm sorry that maybe people think that, you know, you've just got to understand the nature of the beast here. This is not your typical gold deposit where you can drill it in various places, come up with the same grade. This is a nuggety effect, narrow vein deposit where there are very high grade pods and some sort of, you know, other than that, there's either low grade or zero grade quartz as well in the mix. So you've got to identify those high grade pods, and the only way to do that is to start with drilling for structure, isolate that structure that you know has been gold bearing in the past, get in there afterwards and do development. So this development we're doing, you know, is part and parcel of the, you know, advanced exploration. Yeah, so we get into those zones and then we start bulk sampling them. And that is the nature of any project of this type. It's exactly the same, whether it was in Wales or whether it was in Canada or whether it was in wherever. This type of deposit, that's how you approach it. So we can always do more drilling and find more structures, and we might well do as a future.
And just touching on dewatering again, can you say anything more about any updates in this space?
In terms of where things are at with dewatering?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. We've mentioned quite extensively on one of our recent RNSs where we'd got to, and that it had been quite an involved process with Natural Resources Wales. And I can understand why that is, because obviously there's a concern that one shouldn't discharge anything into the watercourse that could cause any environmental ecological impact. And whilst we have got the best consultants working on all of those aspects, and they and we are very confident that there will be no issues. We've designed a very robust scheme for dewatering. Naturally, that is something that NRW had a number of questions about, and unfortunately for us, it went through several rounds of, you know, back and forth. Where we're currently at, we announced as well, is they want to do a habitat regulations assessment on the plan. We have been writing up a report system in that. Report is pretty much ready to go now. It's sitting on Mark and my desk as of very late last night for a final review.
We've done extensive water testing over 2 years now. We're 100% confident that there is no pollution, there is no escape of anything deleterious out of the mine. So it's a process we have to go through, and as George says, we've got the documentation, and NRW have pledged that they will fast track it to as much as they possibly can. So we trust them in that. And yeah, we hope to start the dewatering pretty soon.
And would you say that you are confident that enough exploration and modeling has been done in order to determine the location of a trial adit?
Yeah, I think that's well, not a trial adit, but the development we've talked about in terms of the shaft and the crosscut that we're looking to put in. Yes, we're confident enough to do that work for sure.
That's great. And just more generally, can you say anything about why you think the share price has continued to sort of fluctuate from highs of 0.5p to 0.2p, despite sort of recent positive reports in terms of your gold assets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the problem with mining and with expectations is that mining projects take a long time to come to fruition. Actually, this mining project is going to take a lot less time to come to fruition than your average project, because it's a brownfield site, because there's a mine there. So we're building on significant underground development and knowledge. We've added hugely to the knowledge of the Clogau St David's gold system, massively, more than anyone has in decades. So we have nothing to be apologetic about in terms of the work we've done over the last 3 years. I think the team, Mark and his team, have done an absolutely phenomenal job, and no one would have done a better job than us in taking the mine to this point. So I think part of the problem is that sort of short-termist thinking that wants everything to be done, yesterday, and that's not how it works. This type of mine as well is, it's complex. The geology is complex. The gold distribution is a complex matter as well, and not easy to predict. And so, those are the challenges that we've had to grasp and battle with, and have done, as I say, very, very well. But, we're not in a position, an average mining project from start to finish, if it ever gets there, is going to be 10 years plus. And almost all of them never get there. We've only been working 3 years. We're getting to a point now where we are wanting to put in new development to know whether we've got economically extractable resources. We're very close to a sort of final decision once we put that development in as to whether this might go forward to commercial production. So we're in a very, very strong position, and we'll have those answers before too long. So I think we're in a good place. But obviously people are, impatient, and they want gold production, but we can't do any more than we're doing.
Do you think at this point is when the share price will appreciate again?
I think there's various things that might help the share price. The dewatering approval that we've talked about, because I know people are very focused on that, and so are we. So once that's through, we can crack on with dewatering, and it's not a big exercise, frankly. It'll be done within, I don't know, Mark, 4 to 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really not a big exercise. And so once we can crack on with that, we'll really be motoring there on the lower electrode level. So that, I think, will help the share price. Once we start development activities, these shafts that we've talked about, and just to sort of, I think people also need to understand that I think there might be a bit of a fear that this sounds very expensive. It's actually quite modest, the cost of this development. We are working final costings, but just to give you a sort of ballpark idea, on a per meter basis, we're talking about maybe around £1,100 a meter for putting in the development. So you can imagine if we're talking about a 48 meter cross cut, we're talking in ballpark terms, don't hold me to this, about £50,000. So I hope that gives you an idea that it's not, phenomenally expensive what we're talking about. I think it's very important. We won't do anything that's phenomenally expensive, because obviously we need to do things sensibly and ultimately bring into being a profitable mine, not a mine where there's a huge amount of debt associated with it. So, but that's a fairly modest proposition, I would say. Mark, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, George. Yeah, I think, and those costs for development, we've got somebody working on that. It's a very experienced mining engineer. We've gone down to things like the cost of the hose pipes, the cost of the lubrication, it's the cost of the detonators, right down to as much detail as we possibly can. We're still going through those costs, because you always forget something, but it's not expensive whatsoever. It's the way. It's where we need to get there now. We can't afford to keep ploughing more money into drilling, because the bang for your buck is no longer there. We can drill another 5 or 10 holes, and I don't think it will give us any more information on the structure at all. So the time is now right to get down there and start developing and opening up the quartz veining in the development end.
So George, there have been a few speculations in regard to Alba's past associations with Stella and UKOG. Since this may cast some doubt in the minds of certain shareholders, what would you say in response to this?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think, to be honest, Fran, there's a lot, it seems to be, from what people are telling me, and I must say I'm not an avid reader of or follower of chat room sites. We're too busy for that sort of thing. But I'm told by our friendly shareholders that there seems to be a lot of chatter about some very odd things. There seems to be a lot of disinformation and, frankly, misleading information on some of these chat rooms. I would just counsel that people take this sort of thing with a huge pinch of salt. But in terms of Stella Resources as they were, I mean, we don't have any past associations with them beyond the fact that we bought their interest. We bought their interest in Clogau out from them some years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. That was the start of our involvement with Clogau. So we don't have any association with Stella. As to what they did in the past, I mean, they were an investment company, as I recall it, 49% holders of Clogau. They didn't control it or operate. I couldn't tell you what they did and didn't do, and I couldn't tell you what they did and didn't promise. Frankly, it's irrelevant to us. Shareholders should just judge what we've done, not what previous operators or previous interest holders in the project have done, which frankly is completely irrelevant, as I say. I mean, let's just, without wishing to get on my soapbox, but let's just remind shareholders of some of the things that we have done. Now, we've drilled about 3,500 meters in several programs from surface and underground. That's resulted in us identifying several high priority development targets, which we're now looking to develop. We carried out the most extensive rehabilitation of the mine in decades. We acquired and are operating and have got ready to go an operating pilot processing plant at the mine. No one else has done that in decades. We carried out pitting and sampling of the waste tip. No one's done that ever, to my knowledge. And that resulted in grades of 4 grams per tonne. We'll be going back into that waste tip before too long. We carried out the most extensive regional exploration campaign, certainly since the BGS did it in the 70s. We collected 2,000 samples over 18 months. We identified 10 new gold targets. We'll be talking about that soon again. We've explored other work across our license. We've picked up the entirety of the Dewatering goldfield now under exclusive license to ourselves. No one else is going to have any interest or involvement in Clogau and the Dewatering goldfield now, because we've got the entire thing under license to ourselves. We've probably applied for and been granted, I don't know, at a guess, 8 or 10. We've made 8 or 10 permitted development notifications, all successfully with the regulator. We've made several planning applications, all successful with the regulator. We've developed close working relationships with the County Council, the Snowdonia National Park Authority, and yes, with NRW. We've worked very well with NRW for a number of years. That's the reality. That's what we've done. What other people have done or haven't done in the past is frankly just nonsense, and people should disregard that sort of silly chatter on bulletin boards, I'm afraid. As for UCOG, again, we don't have any association with them beyond being a shareholder in Horse Hill Developments Limited. We would have done things differently at Horse Hill had we been the operator, but that's not to say they didn't do their best. Everyone has got a different opinion about some of these things, technical matters, but we are where we are. But it is, as I say, a complete red herring to talk about Stella and UCOG and all this sort of stuff.
Now, just in reference to further potential work for Alba, let's start with the Dewatering goldfield. following the 2019 regional exploration in this area, can you say that you are planning to do any further work here?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. In 2019 or 2018 to 19, actually, we did this was before Mark joined, but we did a phenomenally extensive piece of regional exploration. And I think we took about 2,000 samples, soil samples. We used those, obviously sent those to the lab. Pretty much every sample had gold in it. We found gold mineralization therefore over about a 9-kilometer stretch of the gold field. And we then, from that work, put it into our model and identified 10 gold targets. These are virgin targets, nothing to do with the Clogau mine or other working that really they're away from significant historical workings. So that was phenomenal work. Yes, we've been focused on the mine ever since for obvious reasons, but we've actually been doing a lot of work recently on that regional exploration, and I can't say too much about it now, but we'll be releasing some news on that in the near future. So we've taken our understanding and knowledge of those 10 gold targets further, and as I say, we'll soon be putting out some updated news on that and where we're going to head next on the regional piece.
And are you looking at any other acquisitions, or will you be focused on the existing projects that you have?
Look, I mean, what's the message from Greenroc? I mean, we took on those assets pretty much as new licenses from the Greenland government over the last 3-4 years. We developed them to a point where we spent maybe, before this field season, we spent maybe £1.5 million on them, I think, which is fairly modest in mining exploration terms. We'd advanced them quite successfully. I think we've advanced them even further this season, this summer. And we then were able to spin them out into Greenroc for a price of £6 million. So a sort of, if you like, in bald terms, a 400% increase on our net asset value. And that's just for starters. And that's not the name of the game with Greenroc. It's about them, the Greenroc management, which actually we are part of, building those assets now into something substantial, being the next big Greenland mining company. And our stake in it, our 54% stake, will, as a result of that, increase in value significantly. So the message, the lesson, I suppose, of all of that is there's definitely scope for acquisitions if you make the right acquisitions. We acquired the Amitsov project some years ago, and it's now turning into really quite a significant part of the portfolio for Greenroc. We didn't pay a lot for it at the time. I think it's going to be worth a lot more in years to come. So yes, acquisitions and the right acquisitions can definitely help the company. And that's the same with Alba. We're much more focused now. We've got these big investments in Greenroc. We've still got the Horse Hill investment. We've got a focus now on the operating assets in Wales and to a lesser extent in Ireland. There is definitely scope for adding a complementary asset to Alba. And it won't surprise you to know that we constantly look at acquisition opportunities, because we don't rest on our laurels. Whilst we think that Clogau and the Dolgellau Gold Belt have got, phenomenal potential, and we are pushing very hard to get Clogau into production, that doesn't mean we ignore other opportunities that are going to add to shareholder wealth. So, there's nothing in the offing, but there is always, that is always part of our thinking, is what will add to our share price and add to our long-term shareholder wealth. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but that hopefully gives you an idea.
Of course. And just to round off, in terms of looking ahead, obviously communications for the company will be a pretty important factor. What does Alba intend to do to enhance this moving forward?
Well, we've got your wonderful selves at Vox. We've been working with you for a number of years, and we think it's very successful. We love the product and how you get our messages out to the market and to shareholders and to other interested people. So we will continue working with you if that's all right. We also have recently taken on St Bride's PR. They're very, very experienced financial PR firm. They've got huge experience in mining in particular. And the team is just already showing its value in terms of the work that they're doing for us. So as a result of those things, you know, shareholders can expect a lot more engagement in terms of social media, certainly, and in terms of content, social media. So we did try very hard to keep that going, but as you can imagine, when things are really busy, they're really busy. But it'll help now that we've got better support in place to ensure that shareholders do get regular updates that I think they deserve. It doesn't mean we flood the market with RNSs. It just means that the day-to-day stuff gets, the story gets told more consistently, and I think that's only going to be a good thing for us going forward. And we'll do more of these Q&As as well, so do keep sending in your questions. We don't have anything to hide, and so we're happy to answer questions as they come.
Mark, George, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Fran. Thanks very much.